Welcome. Glad you're here. My name's ELF. It's an acronym for Earth Loving Frequency. And the topic I'm going to speak to today is I've basically been in a healing spiritual transformation for 50 years. I'm 63, and I read I'm Okay, You're Okay when I was 12, and I've read I could write books on attachment theory and the limits of the addictive model and interpersonal neurobiology, cognition, animal behavior, anthropology, blah, blah, I've read broadly and deeply. And what I want to share with you is really an identity that I like, that makes me feel good about myself, is the idea of being a trailblazer, and that I can share with you the gleanings of this 5 decades journey so that you don't have to follow all the paths in the maze yourself. So I can share with you the shortest, most direct way to the goal, which is liberation, joy, and nurturance. And being in that place of really enjoying being alive. So if you don't want to enjoy being alive, if you really want to end all life because you think it's suffering, or this is a bad place, and the idea is to somehow achieve some loyalty test or something to get somewhere else. If that's your trip, then please, this is probably not going to be helpful to you. But for those of us who want to be healthy in our bodies, to feel the joy of aliveness, to participate fully in the aliveness within and around us, what I call Gaia ourselves, then welcome. I'm going to share with you what I've learned in this journey that could make your journey shorter and the least painful possible. So can you do it without pain? Probably not. But these are techniques that will allow you to cut directly to the goal as quickly and as painlessly as I, in my experience, have found possible. And so the first one, I'm going to share like 3. The first one is really simple. I do it every day. It's actually pleasurable, not painful. And what it does is very, very powerful neurologically. It takes some time, but it's like any other skill. It's like learning to play a musical instrument or do a sport where you practice, and what that practice does is you're actually growing neurons. The neurons are wiring together so that you just have to trigger one and the whole chain goes, and they're actually developing things that like turn that into more like a superhighway rather than a city street or whatever, that allows the signal to actually flow down that whole chain, that whole like domino chain, more fast. They insulate it to make it speed up. All of that's happening neurologically, and this is using that same principle, but very, very simply. I have this calendar that I like to read, but that has these spaces, and what I do is I don't want to be intimidating, but I just once a day, I try to put my emotions into words, and then I write the words down just because I enjoy that, because it's fun. It's fun to look back and say, oh, I was feeling happy, or oh, I was really sad. That gives me pleasure, so I do it. But you can do whatever you want. The important thing is to connect the part of our brain that has words with the part of our brain that's having feelings. And you're literally growing neurons. And what you're doing is you're growing neurons between the part of our brain that has nurturance, what some people might call our inner loving parent, or it's the part of our brain that's capable of nurturing, and we're connecting it with that part of our brain that's having feelings that need to be nurtured. And so I think it took weeks, maybe even a couple months, but before I looked up and said, wow, I'm really feeling the difference from this. And it's literally minutes, seconds, once a day. And it's a habit that I've come to really enjoy. And so that's like building your emotional articulation muscle. It's building your nurturance muscle. It's building the neurological structures that allow you to nourish and nurture yourself. And so that's very simple. It doesn't hurt at all. It is a habit to develop. It's one more thing. But like I said, I actually enjoy it, and it's helping me achieve something else I like, which is this beautiful calendar full of this art and poetry that I just love. It's called the Wee Moon. And is that backwards? I guess it was backwards. Anyway, and in the past, since I don't really use it as a calendar, it became like a chore. Like I had to read it like a book. So this is actually a win-win. So if you can find something that you would do anyway, or want to do, and that's even better. So really, really simple technique, very, very powerful, particularly over time. It improves your articulation and ability to share your interiority across the board. So it's very powerful technique and completely painless. The second is really the core of the technique. The core technique I found, it's a new one, but it's something called IFS, and okay. So a metaphor I use for trauma is that of a splinter. So if you've ever had to get a splinter out, or if you remember it as a kid, I mean, even as a kid, I knew I had to get the splinter out, and yet I could not hold my arm still. Like, oh, it hurts. Don't do that. No, but I think I did this experiment as a kid. I'm like, oh, there's a splinter. I'm not going to tell mom because she's going to do this painful thing that I don't want to have happen. And it just, didn't take very long before it was hurting more and more and more. And so the analogy I use, the story I tell is, one night you're walking across the living room and you brush your leg on the coffee table and you get this excruciating pain. And that's what's being triggered. And what happens when you experience that level of excruciating pain is you literally go into shock. And so you can't see, you get tunnel vision, you get this sort of buzzing, foggy feeling, and this almost irrepressible urge, to kick the coffee table, right? And sometimes you do, and then you have to deal with the consequences of having kicked the coffee table. But those of us who've grown to adulthood, who understand about splinters, once the shock settles a little bit, you realize, oh my goodness, I've got a splinter, and you go looking for a pair of tweezers, right? So IFS is the tweezers. It goes right to where it already hurts. You look for somewhere where you're holding repressed trauma in your body. It's already in pain, although you're probably numb to it. But if you're feeling it, the numbness is wearing off. And I would highly recommend that you work with a practitioner. You can go to the IFS website, I think, find them. It's called Internal Family Systems is what you search on, or IFS. And even the lowest level of practitioners, it's a very, very simple technique to learn. They don't have to spend a lot of time studying it, so they don't have to charge a lot of money. And it doesn't take a lot of finesse or art. It's a very, very simple nurturing technique that we all have the basic tools to do. But working with a practitioner is just a little bit easier. So if you can afford it, it's relatively inexpensive. If not, there's books, and as well, there's also the founder, the guy who invented it, has 6 free guided meditations on Insight Timer, which is also a free app. So you can gain the benefit of this completely free. I just recommend. I'm not a practitioner. And I don't have affiliates with any of them, but I recommend it as the least painful way, the most easy, because they're getting you to the nurturance without you having to have that skill as well. You don't have to have any skill in IFS. They will meet you there, and guide you, and it's basically pure nurturance. So it's something that's already hurting. You're relieving an existing pain, and you step directly into that joy and liberation and nurturance. And what I find is, so the idea behind IFS is that basically we're every age we've ever been. And what trauma is something that we didn't have the social support to process at the time for whatever reason. And so it stays stuck. And so that part of us kind of stays stuck at that age. And what I find with my inner kids is mostly pain is just a message. They have what they feel is an important message to deliver. And a lot of times they've taken on adult responsibility that was too much for them because for whatever reason, their environment wasn't adulting for them well enough, wasn't nurturing in the way they needed. And this is completely, saying this in a completely no blame way. I mean, I do know that I've experienced trauma that was malicious, that had malicious intent behind it. But so I'm not trying to belittle that, but it's also entirely possible to have trauma when it was kind of like a communication error, or everyone was really doing their best, but you can still end up with something you couldn't process at the time for whatever reason. And so both are true. And those little ones, they're just overburdened. They're taking on an adult responsibility that was more than was appropriate for them for whatever reason. And they really would rather be unburdened and go play. And so IFS goes directly from, oh, here's this thing that hurts, to, oh, I can play now. And so so I would say this is the absolute fastest way to go from numb and trauma to, oh, I can play now, to that joy and opening, which is what we're seeking and healing. So that is those two are the simplest, least painful, and most effective techniques that in my 50 years of this work, I found. They get right to what needs relief, and they give that relief very, very quickly. And you don't have to sit, you don't have to understand, you don't have to know what happened even necessarily. You just need to message received, and the practitioner will guide you to, can you let the person who has the adult experience, can you let the part of me that has the adult experience handle this now? I'm much better at it than you are. And the little one is like, yeah, go, thank you. Obviously you want to work with someone who can help you or do this yourself. So that's the work. And you actually don't want, like when we're overwhelmed by feeling, we're blending with that part of, that's the terms they use, but we're allowing that part of ourselves to be the fullness of our experience. And properly done with IFS, you stay in your adult here and now experience, and you talk to, I'm doing this, you talk to that other part of yourself. You actually don't let it blend with you. So this technique is actually the least painful because you're not being overwhelmed by those feelings. You're just talking and having compassion for that young part of yourself. And so the technique of connecting those parts of your brain neurologically really supports and nourishes this technique as well. Although they're independent, you can do IFS without the other technique. And then the third thing, mostly because you just kind of need three things, is everything else you've ever heard. I use music that makes my spirit feel elevated, and I feel like this helps. I also do. I try to visualize 4 dimensions. This is what's called a hypercube, and I find that I have a playlist that I'll try to figure out how to make public. That will explain what that does, and I really do feel like that literally expands my neurological capacity to process stuff. But the main thing, and that gratitude, letting go, all that stuff. But the main thing is just turn to joy, kind of like the emotions. I haven't been doing this formally, but it's not a bad idea. Just whenever you think of it, but if you want to develop a daily habit or whatever, but just think about joyful things. Think about things that bring you joy. Smile. Smiling actually elevates our mood just by doing it. Look at people who are smiling. Look at YouTube videos of happy, smiling people. Try to expose yourself to things that feel good. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's much more than just in the moment. It actually helps us shift our neurology into where we want to be, what we want to do, what feels good to us, rather than dwelling on what I need to fix or what the problem is. Or, it's like literally being the solution. And that can be used to repress emotion. And that's why if you feel that's happening, techniques like IFS or getting in touch with our feelings by articulation um, are all, intersupportive. But really, can you completely avoid the dark night of the soul? Probably not. And, why do we say it, imply it's just one night, dark week of the soul, dark months of the soul, dark years of the soul? Hopefully not that long. That was my journey, but doesn't have to be yours. But these techniques can help us cut to the chase, can help us do the processing we need to do in order to be able to step into that joy. And that's the end goal, is thriving aliveness, being I just got a notification, distracting. Anyway, that's what I have to share out of my 50 years of hopefully trailblazing and maybe leaving some blaze marks, some guide marks. These 3 techniques. You can read Brené Brown's book on the Atlas of Emotion, I think it's called. It's a brilliant book, but that's all up here. To benefit from that book, don't look things up in the dictionary. Just try to put the best words you can, even if you substitute jealousy for envy. Just whatever words you use for yourself to articulate how you're feeling, both physically and emotionally, and right now. I do physically a lot because the emotional is the most important. You can't get it right. You can't get it wrong. It's just about building those connections between the language center and the emotional center. And then internal family systems, it just gets those splinters out as quickly and painlessly as possible. It's, emotional tweezers, very, very effective. And then all the other techniques of listening to music, different, whatever visualization feels good to you, and turning toward joy. There's a spiritual teacher who now says, follow your delight, doing the next most delightful thing. So at any time when you're like, what do I want to do now? It's like, what will delight me the most? It's a very powerful spiritual challenge, I find, because we have a very underused delight muscle. So think in terms of joy, in terms of delight, in terms of nurturance. And then you're there, then you're in healing. And so if you do that, if you turn to joy and then find yourself, why am I not able to feel this joy? What's in the way? And then you find, the splinter, and then use IFS to remove it, and you're back in joy. So is there a completely painless way to transform pain into spiritual awakening and healing? Maybe, I don't know. But in my 50 years of doing this work, I found 3 techniques that are the least painful possible and go most directly from the discomfort we're in to a state that's more comfortable and more joyful. And those are, naming our feelings, IFS, and then all the things that elevate our mood, things that delight us and give us joy now. So I'm Elf, and for Earth Loving Frequency, and I'm really glad you're here. And maybe we'll be here together again if I do another one of these videos. So blessings. Thank you here, and may you have the most joyful and least painful life and day possible.